We are on verse 13, and I want to discuss a little bit more, especially the application of these questions, which I asked you to set aside for the sake of clarity to begin with. So we're in the middle of, and we're really just talking about the adjective prepon, which means fitting or proper, right. What's the right thing for this? Okay, prepon est in gunaika, it is proper for a woman. Judge for yourselves. The question is it proper for a woman to pray to God uncovered, head uncovered? Just one big adjective in Greek, akatakalupton. Is it proper? You figure it out, right? Understood answer, no. Or does not nature itself teach? Okay, does not nature itself teach you, humas, that for the man, if he has long hair, it is atimia to him. It is dishonor to him. The description of a man having long hair is the description also of a man lying with another man in Romans 1. Atimia, it's dishonor, okay? It's just wrong. No need for elaboration. Okay. But if the woman has long hair, it is her glory. Man is the image and glory of God. Woman is the glory of man. The glory of a woman is her hair. Does this seem degradingly superficial? Someone might say it does. I don't think it does, because Paul has in view many things, some of which he's not actually explaining right now, but which have to do with the fact that a woman's appearance does matter a very great deal, and properly so. Properly so. That is not superficial in her, for her appearance to matter. Okay? So, for hoti hekome, okay, the hair, for the hair as a covering, or if you want to be really strange, canopy, peribolayu. Don't be really strange. Just, you could say covering, but just note, it's not actually quite the same word as we've been using. Okay, peribolayu is a covering over top. It is given to her, has been given to her, derotai, that's a perfect. So the covering has been given to her. Okay. Now, something else to note is that at least, what do we have in the ESV? Because I have the NRSV over on the right-hand side here, which is not all that helpful. Okay, so they say in verse 13, the ESV says uncovered, which makes the answer to Paul's question, does she have long hair, good enough? So proper application, according to the ESV, would be the woman has long hair. Notice that Paul doesn't actually use the same words in those verses. He doesn't say, is she uncovered and her hair is a covering. In Greek, he says unveiled, like doesn't have a garment on top, because remember, the man perversely does earlier on. The man has something on top and the woman doesn't. Paul's not originally talking about hair. Okay? So what's interesting is the NRSV, which is sponsored by the National Council of Churches, it's like the liberal Protestant, actually recognizes that Paul wants her to put something else on besides her hair. And the ESV doesn't. So make of that what you will. But the issue here is wearing something else besides your hair, and he presumes that she should. Does not nature itself teach you that if a man wears long hair, it is degrading to him or dishonorable? If a woman has long hair, it is her glory, for her hair is given to her for a covering. But if anyone is disposed to be contentious, We have no such custom, nor do the churches of God. Okay, so he's actually saying, and the word custom there in Greek is kind of what is, I mean, that really is the best word, sunetheon. It's just sort of, it's what we do. It's what we do. And we, being this sort of apostolic we that Paul likes to use himself and Sosthenes, right? But and also he says none of the other churches do this. So once again, Corinth is unusual. Okay. So the application here is, I think if you just wanted to just be at rest with 1 Corinthians 11, women would just cover their heads as they really did seemingly in Christian churches, as far as I can find, until roughly the 50s or 60s. And then you just wouldn't have to worry about any ambiguity. As it is, it's at least ambiguous. If you want to say exegetically, hey, I think that the long hair is a covering, go for it. I think that's defensible. I just don't agree with it because of the change in vocabulary. And I think it would just be simpler and we wouldn't have to worry about it. In connection with hair length, but also somehow, coincidentally, we changed our practice with how women dress in worship in the 50s and 60s. There are lots of other things related to changing female appearance and our understanding of how a man covers a woman and protects her. Adrian and I were talking about during the break, boys. Why do I tell my boys to get over pain in a way that I don't necessarily, or certainly don't to the same degree, tell my girls? Because as a woman, her role in life will be to have a head, and someone will care. But if you have to care for someone and the children she's bearing you, then some just, indifference to pain is going to be really helpful for you in life, because she needs you to not break down under stress and pressure and pain, because she truly is, different passage, a weaker vessel. She's going to shatter more easily, and you need to protect her, right? So even things that we, kind of traditional ways of behaving that we commend differently to boys and girls, are built on the idea not just that they are different, but that they are being prepared either to be someone's head or to be covered by another, and to be loved and protected by another. So the significance of changing feminine appearance, or women dressing like men, or women appearing publicly like men do, whether we're talking about hair length or head uncovered or shaving their head, which Paul just sort of thinks is like a crazy thing, like she might as well just shave her head. Well, we got him, Paul, we got shaved head with like the stubble dyed blue, those are not, I think, just random matters. Like all of a sudden one day we decided that, some women should shave their head and dye their hair blue. That, I think, is expressive of other changes, and especially of not sensing that you are covered as a woman. Yeah, because you're out there, you're competing with men, or you hate men, or men are the problem with the world, and masculinity is toxic, etc. I think a lot of these things are related, right? So, a lot of thoughts. That's my application. Do you want more application?
Oh, this is just most interesting to me, because this is just where life is lived. Nadia Boltz-Weber, ELCA, shock jock.
Short hair.
Short hair dyed blue once upon a time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, here in Denver, Church of Sinners and Saints. There weren't actually any people there. There was like 17, and they were all homosexuals.
Yeah.
So then she gets around with Gloria Steinem, and the world loves her.
Yeah.
But she's not actually a pastor.
Yeah.
She's just whatever,
Yeah.
pornography incarnate.
She does.
But then in my house, my sons say things like, "Dude, you're crying like a girl," or there's this insult that you're crying like a girl. But I say, no, you're crying like a Cheryl boy, because boys actually cry more than girls when they're little, because boys do boy things. And so they will jump off the roof onto the trampoline and miss and cry, but their sisters would never try that.
That's right. Yeah. No, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
They will stand on the bike seat and bash up their face, but their sisters won't do that.
Yeah.
So the boys do cry more than the girls.
Yeah.
But then they also then learn to hopefully deal with that more
That's
than
right.
the girls.
And also for different causes. So like there's an emotional complexity in the girls. They will cry over things that are not immediately, it's like, why is this? But it's always deeply connected to, I'm not appreciated, or I'm not being loved, or I'm being made fun of, or something, to which the boys can quickly become very indifferent. So yeah, and you see it from the first, how different they are. If they are that different, is God actually intending or preparing them to be the same? I think at this point we see the real significance of the fact that we chose in the 1970s not to ordain women. Lots of other things changed about women's roles in the Missouri Synod, not just head coverings and worship. Immediately before that, we chose not to ordain women. I think now we're beginning to understand the, I think, very salutary consequences of that. Even though, sometimes when you look at discussions of why don't we ordain women, it's just like, because women aren't allowed to be pastors. But everything else is on the table. Everywhere else in life, everyone's the same. You just can't be a pastor. And I think we failed to understand that the reason the pastoral office is what it is because it is an office which is exercised in a creation that has a certain order, not just because randomly, for no particular reason, Jesus said, I just like the boys up there, that's it.
One throw-off has always been, you can't be a pastor because the pastor can't be a mother, and that has better bearing and understanding today than it did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But then this political correct society, it's Mother's Day, unless you can't be a mother, and then we feel sorry for you, and you go down to this lowest common denominator.
Right.
Lord have mercy on us, because there's some mothers who can't be mothers, and therefore all the other mothers should repent. But if you could just extol motherhood, etc. Why is it by nature insulting for a man to have long hair?
It's
by
dishonorable.
nature.
It means that there is something that seeking after honor, which again, that's, nobody says that, but seeking after honor is actually worthwhile, or seeking to have honor is worthwhile, and therefore you don't want to do things that are dishonorable. These are things, because they're natural law things, it's hard for me not to express them in culturally specific terms, right? So we went shooting yesterday. So the first time I went shooting with my dad, I got the 4 rules, because my dad was a drill sergeant. You get the 4 rules, you're like 7 years old. You don't know what any of this even, I just want to shoot guns, But you get the 4 rules, and then the gun kicks back, and it really hurts, but I'm not going to cry when I'm shooting a gun with my dad. Even though I'm 7, and it really hurts, I'm just not going to cry. And it's good for me to force myself to suppress my emotion, because it's dishonorable to express it. I'm not yet there, right? I'm not where I want to be. I don't want it to hurt like that every time, but I need to advance towards that. And if my honor is just destroyed, then I'm going to stop advancing. I'm going to, quit shooting or quit playing this sport that is painful sometimes or whatever. So preservation of honor also assumes that there are things worse than feeling bad.
Why is the long hair
Specifically?
dishonor?
The long hair.
That we make a movie and the guy walks through the forest with long hair and the trees are like spitting at him and annoyed with him because he has brought shame to all of God's creation because his hair is long.
Because it is him trying to be a woman. That's why it's dishonorable. Things that would be totally appropriate for a woman are not appropriate or fitting or honorable for him. David?
What constitutes long hair? Look at the corpus behind you. What constitutes
There's a
long
relativist
hair?
in every crowd.
It's the question I get when we talk about this chapter.
Who asked the question? I'm interested. Is it Gladys or is it Norman?
I've gotten the question
Norman
from
asked the
both.
question too.
No, not a
You know
Norman.
it when you see it.
Not a Norman, more like
Kyle,
what's
Jaden, Jaden.
a young
Yeah.
kids. And why does the painting of Jesus have long hair? Is what I always get for the answer. So they're wondering, long hair. That looks like long hair.
I don't honestly know. I don't honestly know why the artistic tradition is what it is, because it's not necessarily so. And the most realistic archaeological, stuff that we have, long hair isn't actually normal on men.
We're trying to make Jesus prettier.
So I don't know. I mean, the tradition of longer hair on men in biblical scenes is very long as a tradition, but there's not a historical reason for that. There's not a historical reason to think that Jesus' hair was longer than yours or mine.
Does it maybe just indicate his youth? Whereas you'd have like in the other room here, we've got, is it Paul, and he's bald with a long beard?
That's based on the Acts of Paul and Thecla. That image of Paul, that the baldness is that tradition. I have a textual source for that, but
a lot of the other church fathers, typically they're older in the icons and the imagery, and so they typically are bald.
well, the understanding of age and the significance of Jesus' age is that time in your 30s is understood to be fully grown without any onset of senility. That's the point. So he's not figured as young. It's like the right age. Yeah. And if you think about the descriptions of male appearance biblically are generally bad news. Absalom and Saul have great hair.
And Absalom, the picture of vanity, is hung to death in a tree.
Yeah. Right.
And
By his hair.
Jesus, then, the opposite of vanity, hung
And a tree, naked. Yeah.
naked.
So I'm more righteous than anybody in this room.
Well, no,
I am more right.
you're jumping too far. Paul's not saying anyone's justified by wearing head coverings in worship. He's saying you should because you exist as such. That's why. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I often wonder if maybe people confuse the word Nazarite with Nazarene.
That's a good,
that
yeah.
May be
a
way, but which brings us to another point.
Sure. Okay.
About the Nazarite,
Yeah.
which is not to ever cut the hair.
Yeah.
Of course, that's a special condition. I mean, we have some people taking a Nazarite vow. For others, the vow is imposed upon them at birth.
Yep.
And so, I don't know about the hair, unless for the Nazarite, it's so stark of a difference from everybody else that the Nazarite male has this long hair, which distinguishes him. There are other conditions too, abstinence from alcohol,
Which is highly unusual, right? Such that, the Rechabites are notable, and the point with the Rechabites is simply that they follow this sort of just made-up human tradition, but Israel does not follow her God. Yeah.
Head coverings for women in any way normative.
Yeah, it should be. See, I don't think head cover, and the reason I don't worry about it, I go into worship and it's not like, at Redeemer, I want to say where I go in Fort Wayne, 1/10 of the women cover their hair. The reason it doesn't bother me is because there's so much underneath it that nobody gets that I don't expect that to change in my lifetime unless we changed a lot of other things. And I know Latin Mass families where, by virtue of custom, they all cover their heads. Or Orthodox Jewish women cover their heads, but their husband doesn't work, and then they work full time, and they have 8 kids, and the husband studies the Talmud all day. So I want to take these things in the right order, and the right order would be to understand man, image and glory of God, woman, the glory of man. And once you begin to put those things into practice, I think the head coverings would just come.
I mean, on the other hand, lex orandi, lex credendi, however
It
that
is true.
goes.
Yeah, that's right.
So it does perhaps help, but
Yeah.
then we get the Easter bonnet, which is
Right.
worse than no bonnet at all, because it starts to do the very thing
Yeah,
that
the
you're
hat-
guarding against.
The hat, the glory of woman.
So, but I mean, there is this little tradition within Lutheranism where there are some Lutheran women that are covering their head,
Yeah,
and then
right.
they're kind of almost making it a legalistic thing. You all also ought to cover
Right,
your
yeah,
heads, and
yeah.
I don't really know how to think about
Yeah,
it.
we've had families, at least at Hope, this one family at Hope, where I used to be there, who made church fellowship dependent upon head covering.
I met a Reformed guy like that, and so he just didn't go to church.
Right? I mean, that's what happened.
I'm serious.
They didn't find the church.
He didn't want to become Lutheran, and part of why he didn't become a Lutheran was because we weren't mandating head coverings. So.
But connected to this is the braiding of the
Well,
women's
the
hair.
braiding of women's hair, the putting on of jewelry, that's not something where Paul's saying this is what should be done. That's a contrast. That is, adorn yourself with virtues rather than this stuff. And I don't think it means like you can't do that at all. Because braiding is also just highly practical with long hair, right? I think the contrast there is, why don't you worry more about adorning yourself with virtues than your appearance? Yeah, that's a contrast. This is what are you actually supposed to do? And you guys in Corinth are doing the opposite of what you should. The men cover their heads, the women don't.
Is there anything associated with men covering their heads today? Why does a man cover his head? Hell, if I even know, I don't even know. Presumably, once upon a time, a man covered his head because he worked. And so yesterday, maybe some of our heads got burnt because we were out in the elements. So a man, at least in our lifetimes, may cover a head because he works.
Right.
That's not really true. Now we cover our heads because we relax or we're cool or
Yeah.
something. In Corinth,
He would
why
cover his
would a
head to
man
signify
cover
that he was praying, because that's what everyone else does. And there is actually a male version of women not covering their heads in worship anymore, and that is men sitting in church with ball caps on, which I have seen actually enforced. I have seen pastors enforce that in a way, and this is typical of our culture. We're still willing to ask men to do things. Women, it's like, I don't, but that's the male version, is you can't cover your head when you're praying. Your sister can wear a hat on Easter. You're not going to wear a hat.
We need stupid rules for boys and girls, particularly boys.
Yeah.
The hat has become a symbol for a male that's synonymous with long hair. He wears it backwards. He's so awesome. Everybody look at me. Oh, the coolest guy just walked in the room with his hat backwards. If you're in the sports culture, these things are absolutely true.
Yeah.
Your sons, you should say, do not even wear your hat in the house.
Yeah.
Your grandfather used to say, don't wear the hat in the house. And so you, son, do not even wear the hat in the house. Don't even dare think about wearing a hat in the house of God. But just out of this greater view of yourself in relation to God, son, I'm going to kill you if I find you wearing your hat backwards. But when you come in the house, don't wear the hat in the house and all more in the church.
I just mock the back. It stops pretty quickly. I mock it, which is a typically male way of dealing with each other. I don't do that with the girls. I tell them earnestly, like, sweetie, don't do that. But I'll make fun of the boys.
Just these silly practices I mean, if the Father will assert himself, do
Anything else
teach
before we
things.
do the Lord's Supper stuff? I think it could be man, woman. Yeah.
It seems like Paul is repulsed by long hair
Yep.
in a way that we, of course, aren't at all. But that, like,
Speak for yourself. I've always felt that my standards are appropriate for somebody who was born exactly 100 years before I.
The man bun, Jared? I mean,
I'm not sure. I think it'd be if a man came to my church wearing a dress, I would not permit him inside the building. That is insulting. You cannot come in here. If they came with long hair, that's fine. I would judge him, and then you could come on up. But a dress is even so. David Bruce back there probably wears a kilt, and I wouldn't think that's woman-like. Not at all. But if somebody came to church with one, I would be utterly repulsed. In a way, I couldn't bring myself to be repulsed by someone with long hair.
I think it's also it's a matter of desensitization, right? So if Paul just doesn't encounter, so long hair on men, let's accept Nazarites, because who knows if Paul ever saw somebody under a Nazarite vow. The vow that he takes involves shaving the head. Long hair on men would be, example I can think of is the Galli, who are kind of a Romanized version of the mother goddess cult. And I think this is significant. So when you worship a female god, here's your cult, they castrate themselves and their hair is very long. He could have seen it. He could have seen that somewhere in the Greco-Roman world, but he's not seeing it. I mean, that's why you can ask rhetorical questions when you figure people are going to agree with you. So I think it's a question of, we see so much more gender fluidity expressed that it's like, okay, a dress, that's too much for me. And I get what you're saying, because it does have to do basically with what you're accustomed to and have seen. What have I seen on TV, et cetera, et cetera. That's all powerful, because Paul can be disgusted by something because he never has to see anything else. It would be like swearing in front of your great-great-grandparents. The example that I use in this regard is, you guys know the show Deadwood? It's on HBO. It was about Deadwood, South Dakota. Okay, it was a Western show. It's on HBO, so you can imagine the graphic nature of the show. They had to fake the dialogue because hardened criminals in 19th century America really did just say things like dang nabbit. They didn't say things that are actually graphic. So it's historically false, but they tried to do it to excess because a respectable person wouldn't even say dang nabbit in the 19th century. So I think it's an issue of Paul is sensitive to long hair on men because he's not dealing with all the other stuff that that we are. Yeah.
we should be sensitive
We
to
should be
long hair
sensitive.
on men.
Yeah, there you go.
And it's just all upside down.
Yeah.
So you meet a guy who is the first guy to wear a man bun, and he claims to be more manly than all the other men because he is such a man that he can wear a man bun. And the same machoism is associated with the best of all athletes wearing pink shirts. And so I'm like, you look like the Barbie aisle at Walmart, and you're telling me you're the most macho there is. So then you almost have to like out-macho them to tell them that they're making the world upside down. These are just everyday things for every boy in your church, just everyday things. And so you just create this culture within the culture that has the backing of the Holy Spirit. And so then the Christian boys get to mock the world back. Look at all you idiots. You're so confused by the devil that I'm a real man. This is my whole life, this chapter.
These 14 verses specifically, yeah. Anything else on these 14 verses? Yeah, okay.
When we talk about men with long hair,
Yeah.
and maybe I'm just not in the right circles to see that very often, but when I think of what Paul's talking about, it's like where you would see a man and his hair would be long, really long, and combed, and like a woman's hair. I mean, that's the only way to say it. Not like the NFL athlete who's got some longer hair, but he is super macho, and you would never see him and be like, from the back, oh, that's a woman.
Yeah.
You know, now I think Adrian's point is they're messing it up for others, but the NFL players who wear long hair are, I mean, you know, they're in the locker room. Those guys are macho to the nth degree. I mean, you don't have to worry about that. But maybe they set a bad example, though. But what I think what he's talking about is someone where you mistake them from the back because their hair is so long and combed nicely, and they're effeminate in such a way that they're totally. And next thing you know, they have makeup on, you know, that kind of thing. And so then they do walk, like you said, a dress. I think it all goes together. And that's Paul. I think that's Paul's point to some degree.
It is.
And I think the point is when we think about 70 years ago or whatever, then when it was all taken for granted, we were all saying, let's not be legalistic because we all understand it. Now we're at the point where we're saying this stuff matters, and the people who are being raised in the church, that a head covering to the woman or the long hair business for the man is not actually offensive to them. I mean, and so then I think it is, to your point, it's just a matter of time where these things don't actually offend the larger group. But I don't think they're offensive to the people that are being brought up in the church today.
Yeah, that's true. But they all, wherever I've seen head coverings on women in a Lutheran church, they're always young women. And I think that's simply because of the younger you are, the starker the difference between the church and the world feels in America. Whereas the older you get, you may actually remember or still experience. Like I would have this issue when I would talk about evangelism, and my older members would say, I don't know anybody that's not a Christian. Okay, well, that specific member lived in a retirement community, and I believe him. They did all go to church on his block, right? But for the kid that's in, high school, he's being weird by asserting that he just is a boy. And he's yeah. So if you say, hey, you got to take your ball cap off, or your girlfriend here needs to wear a head covering if she's going to come to church with you, it's like, that's fine. She's a girl. I'm a boy. And that's the way I like it. So I think that's part of the shift. Yeah. All right. It feels anticlimactic to start talking about the Lord's Supper now, weirdly. But let's start. Okay, if we're okay with that. All right. We can come back to it if we're not. But if we need to finish, and we will, chapter 11 after lunch, that's good too, because I think it's worthwhile. He says, but in the following instructions, I do not commend you. So it sounds like the issue of head coverings will actually be easier for them to fix than what he's about to say. Because when you come together, it is not for the better, but for the worse. For in the first place, when you come together as a church, let's just check our Greek, because that already feels, I always get suspicious when it feels overinterpreted in English. Okay. So when you come together, en ecclesia, I just say in church. What's wrong with saying in church? Okay, because that's what it means. When you come together in church, I hear that you have schismata, schisms, splits, fractures among you, and I sort of believe it. Okay, meros typistio. In part, I believe it. Okay. Now, it is necessary that there be heresis, factions, literally, but not meaning quite the same thing, heresies, that there be factions among you. Okay, why? so that those who are genuine among you may be recognized. Let's say it, the ready or prepared, hoidokimoi, okay, may be phaneroi, apparent, seen, visible, phaneroi, like epiphania, okay, appearance. So that those who are prepared or ready, hoidokimoi, may be apparent. So that is a little bit different than saying genuine and then recognized. It's a little bit different because I think it's going to have to do also with being worthy or unworthy. Okay. Now this is because whenever these two verses that I just read come up, they're usually not used in the context of the rest of the discussion of the Lord's Supper in like 10 verses. They're used in connection with, this is why there are denominations or different confessions or something, which is true. But guess what? That's connected to the Lord's Supper. Okay? So keep going, right? When you come together, I would say literally epito as one, it is not kyriakon depnon, the lordly supper to eat. Now, what does the ESV say? It is not the Lord's Supper that you eat, but what does Paul say? It is not to eat the Lord's Supper. Okay? So the ESV has Paul making a statement about the reality of what's happening, whereas in Greek, Paul is simply saying, your intention is not to eat the Lord's Supper. He doesn't say they're not, which makes a lot of sense because he's going to say that they're actually being harmed by what they're doing. And how could that be if they're just being wounded by potlucks? Okay? They're misusing something partly because they kind of schlub up there like it's any other meal. You are not coming together to eat the Lord's Supper. Okay? For in eating, each one goes ahead with his own meal. Now, this makes sense if they're coming together and they're acting like it's just a potluck. One goes hungry, another gets drunk. Why would that be? Yeah, because some of them bring a lot and some of them bring nothing. Okay? So they're behaving as what? Not members of one another, but totally divided up. Totally. What? Okay, this is great. All right, what does he say? He doesn't say what. He says, what do you say? Okay. Do you not have houses to eat and drink in? So what are they not doing? Having, quote, house church. They have a common place they come together. Or do you despise the church of God and humiliate those who have nothing? That would be the poor who are going hungry. What shall I say to you? Shall I commend or more literally praise you in this? No, I will not. This is just, the rhetoric is just outstanding. I mean, it's just, he's sweeping along mightily, right? Okay. For I received from the Lord what I also delivered to you. So these are the tradition words. So he said they maintain the traditions, but verb for that noun is here, and they're not doing it. So he's going to remind them. And depending on when you think the Gospels were written, this is one of your earliest institution narratives. Okay, don't worry about that. That the Lord Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks. So I want you to think about this action in the context of the stuff that's been going on in Corinth. Jesus has bread. When Jesus has bread, he doesn't gobble it down like an animal. He gives thanks first. They're not doing that. They don't give thanks for bread. Paul asked them back in chapter 4, what do you have that you have not received? What I have received from the Lord, I hand it over to you. And what I received from the Lord is that when Jesus receives things, he gives thanks for them. Jesus. Okay? And when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way also he took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant or testament in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me." Okay, now Paul says, "For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." Okay, the proclamation thing there is a common thing. It's a common proclamation. So when this happens, you proclaim. The action itself proclaims, right? And because the action itself proclaims, how could it be possible for there to be differing proclamations or uncertainty of proclamation in connection with it? Because even the doing of it is a proclamation, okay? Because the eating and the drinking are what the proclamation consists in, okay? Now, that route to understanding what's going on at the Lord's Supper, I sometimes find confusing for people regarding close communion. That is, it was a shorter route for me to explain the introduction of close communion as simply, it's my job, I have to oversee it, I can't be everybody's pastor. I'm responsible for a definite number of souls, and I can't be responsible for everybody's soul if they're drifting in and out and they're going to stay Baptist or they're going to be Catholic and they just happen to be here on vacation. I took kind of a Hebrews tack. I'm an overseer and I have to give account for people, and I can't give account for this nice Baptist lady who says she believes it's Jesus' body and blood, unless she wants to join, and that's going to be more involved. That was fairly simple for people to understand, and they could like it or not like it, but they could at least grasp that. I think sometimes the concept of we are all supposed to be one and all this kind of thing is a little more complex, simply because people are aware that they've been members for 22 years with this other person, and this other person always says weird stuff in Bible class. So what exactly does we proclaim together mean? Or we all have to be of one mind? I know exactly what, Rick always says in Bible class. So I found it simpler simply to talk about oversight and to make it a matter of something I needed to do regarding the Lord's Supper. It's not like the more common tack that I see, like in the big CTCR document about admission to the Lord's Supper really runs almost basically entirely through the idea that we're all supposed to be one. I don't think that's wrong. I just think it's a lot harder to understand and explain. And since I have to actually practice close communion, it also makes it, I'm saying I have to do this, and this is why I have to do this specifically. Before we go on, anything from these verses or about this, way of explaining close communion, or anything that you'd like to discuss so far, and then we'll probably have to break for lunch. Yeah, Brian.
Have you found it fruitful when you were a pastor, even now, and teaching as a professor, to help impress upon your students or before the members of your church the importance of what happens at this particular pulpit and altar as being a definitive proclamation that distinguishes us from other communions? I think what you were saying is that's probably one of the harder tacks to take to talk about closed communion, but it seems so lacking nowadays that I find it unavoidable. I have to talk about it.
After a while, I started basically making everybody do some kind of new member class, even if they were Missouri Synod, because I didn't find it fruitful to talk endlessly about why we're Missouri Synod Lutherans, because a lot of them had no other concept of being Missouri Synod Lutherans, and then a lot of the ones that did, at least on the East Coast, it's like not all that great. It's not something that I want to reinforce. So that's why I went with, I'm not in communion with everybody, and this is the oversight that I'm exercising. I'm not sure what you mean by definitive. So, what are you getting at?
So I guess what I'm getting at is, I've used this verse, maybe you can tell me rightly or wrongly, to describe like what your participation at this pulpit and altar is telling the rest of the world that I believe certain things about Christ and His work and how He blesses us in this world through word and sacrament. And I just find that oftentimes that very concept that, people have a shopper's mentality when it comes to church, of course. They're there to consume a product. It actually, even though our consumerist choices are becoming more and more morally weighted, right? At the same time, people feel like they can indulge in something without necessarily making a bold proclamation about what any sort of convictions they might have. But I'm trying to build that up, at least in the way that I'm teaching people in coming to the altar, that yes, you're saying these things about Christ's presence in the bread and the wine, right? You're saying these things about God's condemnation and also the gospel and what that means. And you are not saying those things when you sneak away or try to have communion at a Baptist altar.
I think, I've said that, no question. David.
I think that the distinction or that definitive instruction or preaching to a pagan, a modern pagan, is not that hard for them to grasp. The issue is people coming from other
I never had a close communion problem with somebody that was a pagan when they started or something. Close communion problems are all either a relative of an LCMS member and or they're like ELCA or something where they feel like they need to take communion. That's where it comes from. I didn't even have it with Baptists or evangelicals. They're kind of weirded out when they first show up anyway, so it's fine, It's always something where they feel like it's a lot like their church, so they want to take communion. Yeah.
Could you? I'm having a hard time putting my finger on what the rebuke is. I think there's a rebuke here in this section, and maybe there's multiple rebukes, or maybe there's just one. Can you?
One is that you guys don't even know what you're doing in church, because when you're in church, you're there like you're just having, a barbecue. Okay. Another rebuke is you are out of line with the tradition that Jesus gave concerning his supper, which I also gave to you. So let me repeat it to you to make it clear. So I think there are at least two. You're out of line, and your being out of line has resulted in you just having potlucks instead of the Lord's Supper.
So what is that being out of line? How are they out of line?
They don't even know what the Lord's Supper might be for.
So they think it's, well, I doubt they think it's symbolic, but they don't recognize it's the Lord's Supper.
Correct. That's why we're going to get, and it'll have to be after lunch, but it's got the verse where it's like the classic dilemma, you do not discern the body of the Lord. And people are always saying, is that the body and blood of Jesus Christ, or is that the church? It's like, it doesn't matter, because if you recognize one, you would recognize the other. So you're treating other people like the church isn't real and they can just go starve if they want to, is related to the fact that you're uninterested in the Lord's Supper because you're just here for a potluck. So the rebukes are interrelated, Bob.
In ritual terms, you might say they're failing to distinguish between the holy and the common.
They just like the common.
Yeah.
Does it make the words of institution liturgical or performative, or that they do institute the supper, that you don't have the supper, the words institute the supper? I mean, you have a lot of communions, fellowships that have the supper, but they don't have the specific words of institution. I'm willing to say that they may indeed have the supper because this is the supper of the Lord, with or without the words, but the words remove all doubt that this is what we have. Or are they in any way, is Paul saying, look, these are the words, you say the words.
Yeah, so I think what is very in order for the consequences to be there that we're going to see after we have our meal, where hopefully nobody goes hungry, is that I think they're still using the words like they're doing lots of things, but they don't understand the actual significance of those things or those words, and therefore they're being harmed. Because if they're not using the words, I don't understand how Jesus is even, if they really are just doing like we do a potluck, then why are some getting sick and some have even died? I think they're using the words and they're being extremely careless, and that's why they're being punished.
So you think liturgically they are saying our Lord Jesus Christ?
Yeah, I do. Where are we at on time? I don't want to run over. Yeah, we're at 11:56, so we'll come back and we'll finish chapter 11 after lunch.